Well, that's a great song. One thing I need to tell you about our songs is some of them just fit no matter what we're talking about, and I'm pretty sure that last one is one of them. However, another thing we always talk about is how that when we choose the music, we're trying to figure out how to make it fit with the yet unwritten message. We pick these songs on Monday. We have a theme, maybe, if it doesn't change by Wednesday, and so on and on it goes. But the fun part for you is you get to go home and study your bulletin and Google the lyrics if you've forgotten them and compare them to the scripture, and you'll see. It just all unfolds. It's the way it's 11:11. It's how it works. I'd like to add my welcome. I'm glad to see all of you guys. Some of you are back from being away, and I think I see some new faces. So stick around. Let us say hello to you. I need to warn you that I have been on about a 3-day coughing spree, and Tom, I just didn't have the heart to call you yesterday and say, I've been coughing more than not, but I have taken some of your home remedies. Many of you have offered up your recipe. This, however, is water. I'm going to try to get through it. If I have to leave, I will be back, because usually I just have to cough a minute, and I don't want to do that in front of you. So here we go. Let me drink some water. So we're in week 2 of this new series that Tom got us started on last week, Catching Fire, Living Exuberantly. And we start with the book of Ecclesiastes as kind of our jumping off place. Now, you may remember that last week's passage from Ecclesiastes, from that very first chapter, is, well, kind of a downer. Now, Tom wrote about that in his blog, and I hope you'll look on the back of your program and find the URL and read that so you'll be all caught up on it. But there's method to the madness of choosing this sort of a downer book and passage. So just to tag back onto that, the first chapter of Ecclesiastes, the writer laments the continual cycle of things. He says, generations come, generations go. The sun rises, the sun sets. The wind blows from the north, it blows to the south, and around and around and around it goes. And his conclusion is, it's just meaningless. Just meaningless. Now, the version we read from last week said it's all smoke, sort of temporary, sort of a vapor. The various English versions of Ecclesiastes, and I have a slide for this next thing, guys. The various versions of Ecclesiastes offer a variety of words to translate the Hebrew word hebel. Some, if you read, will say it's meaningless, meaningless, everything's meaningless. Some will say vanity, vanity. It's all in vain, this life, with all of its redundancy. Some will say something like empty. And then the version we read last week, as I pointed out, says smoke, a mist, temporary, fleeting. Okay, that's all we need that for. When I was in seminary studying Hebrew, my fellow classmates and I had a ton of fun with that word. We were showing off our newfound knowledge of our Hebrew vocabulary, and so we would use this word to smack talk each other on any given topic. Oh, that theological insight you have? Hebel. That interpretation of that scripture, Hebel. Your pick for the Super Bowl win, Hebel, whatever. We just were so proud of ourselves for knowing that word. It is a highly nuanced word, but it carries with it also that idea of temporary and fleeting. And that's actually pretty useful to us if we read the whole book, because this book is punctuated by that word, hebel, meaningless, vanity. And the author definitely seems to be on a negativity rant. And I'm not going to try to rub that out of the book, because that would be hebel. It's there, and it means something. But it's not the only thing that's there. So one thing I like to say about the book of Ecclesiastes is that it tells us the truth about life. Life is tough and messy and full of no solutions. There are problems that seem to be, or in fact are, intractable. They're crazy, kind of like the song we had. Those things are real, and our feelings about them are real, and to pretend otherwise would be meaningless and useless and stupid. And yet, there is also the idea of temporary. Our lives are temporary. Our circumstances are temporary. discomfort is temporary, that bad feeling we get that things are useless is temporary. Dread and fear, despair, all of those feelings are real and usually temporary. And so Ecclesiastes is telling us that truth about life. We feel that way, and we know that usually those are temporary feelings. Ecclesiastes tells us the truth another way, because interspersed with all of that negative stuff, all of that meaningless, are these counterpoints of wisdom that include what I just said, that things are temporary. But these counterpoints offer a different point of view that can kind of jolt us and wake us up out of the humdrum or the despair that we're feeling. And it can wake us up to realize that we can keep going, but not just to keep going, but possibly to keep going with a sense of exuberance. Now, exuberance, like joy, can be one of those sort of plastic, cheap words, a little too perky, a little crazy, right? But maybe if we don't think of exuberance as just bubbly like champagne, but we realize its full meaning, which really means fullness, full life, full of fruit, then maybe that idea of exuberance is a little more meaningful to us, a little more realistic. And so the question becomes, even against the backdrop of the humdrum of life or the horrible catastrophes of life, can there be an exuberant sense of life that wells up in us? Well, wisdom says yes. And Ecclesiastes, for all that it is a book of wisdom. It's kind of a case study in that internal war of the soul that we find when we're trying to find meaning and purpose in the face of injustice and unspeakable tragedy and disappointment about how we thought life would be. And a piece of that wisdom is that we are stronger than we think we are. When my little brother was 7 years old, he threw a baseball through the window of our home. Now, my mom asked that question that all parents inevitably ask, defying all logic, defying all sense of parents should know better than to ask this question because you will not get the answer you seek. She said, "Why did you do that?" Now, kids have two options in these circumstances. They can plead insanity. I don't know. Or they can take the fifth and refuse to testify against themselves. In my home, that would not have been wise to give no answer. My little brother took neither of these options. When Mom said, "Why did you do that?" he said, "I guess I didn't know my own strength." And that became part of our family lore. Now, that's probably true of all of us. We don't know our own strength. And sometimes we get caught up or stuck in those feelings that I've already described. In any number of situations of life, we may begin to feel like things will never change. I don't have what it takes. This is how it's going to be. And it takes a little bit then sometimes to realize that, in fact, we do have strength to deal with whatever this thing is. But we get scared and we get immobilized. We fall into despair or pessimism. And our task then becomes to dig down and find that strength, or to reach out and find our strength together, just as Tom was saying to us earlier. We really are stronger than we think. Sometimes we just need to take inventory of the strengths we have. Now, all of you out there who know anything about counseling are aware of something called strengths-based counseling. And in community development, we call it assets-based approach. And it's just what it sounds like. The idea is to give attention to the assets and the strengths that we have to bear upon the problem at hand. And that seems obvious standing right here, right? But when we are overwhelmed and when we're discouraged and in a really tough place, sometimes it feels like we don't have any tools in the chest to work with. And the goals of that kind of treatment, if you will, or counseling, or even spiritual sharing among ourselves, the goals of that it's not to make us feel more comfortable or to rub out the negativity or to relieve our anxiety necessarily. The goal of that is to help us look within and to find our own strengths, to comfort ourselves, and to know how to move forward, either individually or together. If you notice that scripture passage that Ian read earlier, it says something like, I think I have a different version on here. It says something like, it's not from wisdom that we ask, where are the days gone by? Which is another way of saying there's really not a lot of value in looking to the past all the time. But we've all had that experience, haven't we? Kind of getting stuck in the past, longing for the days gone by, resisting change that's coming upon us. It seems to be a common struggle that we have. We think we want the good old days sometimes, even while psychologists are telling us that the good old days are usually some idealized version of the past. But what's important to realize, because we all look back, is that we actually have the strength to remember the good things about the past and figure out how they connect productively to where we are now. So that when we find ourselves in uncertainty or struggle, we call upon the good successes of our past, the great loves of our past, and they become the path that we walk on to be where we are. So the key is not to compare the past to the future, to the present, but to see how it can serve us productively in the here and now. It's really a strength that we have. We really are strong enough to do that, and in large measure, we do it all the time without thinking about it, but when we're in trouble, when we're in difficulty, sometimes we need a little help to view it that way. I get it, though. Sometimes we look backward because, frankly, what's in front of us is just too scary and stressful. Oh, my goodness, so stressful. But here's the thing about stress, and I'm pretty sure Tom has told us this before, but it's good to hear again. Scientists are recognizing that the stress hormones that are produced are actually the very tools we have to face what is happening. It gives us the strength to face it, those hormones that are produced. And I heard a really great TED Talk about this. This psychotherapist was saying that she's changed how she deals with her clients and her patients. She used to say, avoid stress, it's going to kill you, it's going to kill you. And while it's true that high levels of stress kill us, she said, what is now important to know is that it is what we know about stress that can really affect how we manage that stress. And here it is again, the oxytocin that is produced in us when we experience stress is the stuff of our strength to go on with it. And it's a gift, she said. I tell my clients now, those feelings of stress you have are your gift. They're what you will need to make it. And the second part, and y'all know I'm going to like this part, the second part about oxytocin, and you've heard this before, it's known as the cuddle hormone. It's the one that makes us want to reach out and be together. It makes us fall in love. That is produced in times of stress, and what a gift that is, because that's exactly what we need to do, is to reach out, to ask for help, to realize that we're stronger together than in isolation. And so we don't have to face this difficulty alone. Now, all that conversation is documented in many places. You can go home and find out more about it, but here's something I want to say about that. One more time, I see that the things of faith and the things of science come together. That's really important for us as 21st century Christians. The gap between the things of faith and the things of science come together here. Somehow we are wired for this. We are wired with the biology that provides us strength to cope. We're wired with that innate sense that together is better than isolation. We really, really do need each other. And Ecclesiastes will say that in another place. Over in chapter 4 it says, though one may be overpowered, Two can defend themselves, and a strand of 3 cords just isn't easily broken. So we are stronger than we think we are, and we're stronger together. Now, I'm going to say one more thing about looking back, because I want to give due respect to the very painful and traumatic things that happen to us in life. And for far too many people, these things happen early. And the wounds of those past memories, the scars, they are undeniable. And as we walk together in this life with those wounds and scars, and I'm going to borrow from social science again, we do well to take what's called a trauma-informed approach. And what that means is we look at each other no longer with what's wrong with you, but what's happened. It's not a question you ask out loud. It's something you know inside of yourself as you walk upon the earth with your fellow wounded people. Some people are really terribly wounded, and we must tell the truth about that. But we have tools at our disposal, and one of them is what I said, this trauma-informed approach, which we would say in the language of faith is to have empathy, to be a little more aware that people are hurting, people are in trouble, people are acting this way not because they're just acting this way. I'm not doing this because I'm crazy. Might be wounded. And so this way of being together is a lot more than just being nice. In fact, it holds the key for us helping each other to heal from those wounds. And the good news to me, again, is the stuff of faith and the stuff of science comes together. Like the arcs of a bridge, when they meet, that's where the strength is, right, engineer? I actually read up on all this stuff about arches and bridges, and I was going to say something smart about it, but I decided I better not. But you know what I mean about the amazingness of how the weight and the load is conveyed along the arc of the bridge, and then the weight rests on either side. What a beautiful picture of coming together, of being together. And one day, Don will say that in better words. But to stick with my next to last point, which was that we must be aware of the woundedness of each other and the very real strength that we have to be empathetic. That's one of the greatest strengths we have as humans. And the best practices of the Christian faith bear that out. Well, I'm going to ask the band to come back up, and y'all ponder that important stuff while they're getting there, because I have a story to tell you to close all this out. So this last point is about knowing our strengths, but actually it's about knowing other people's strengths, that other people have strength and wisdom too. And I don't know about you, but this seems to be one of the fine points of life that gets past me sometime. Hey, other people are smart too. Other people are strong too. Other people are wise as well. And so I want to tell you about Nasruddin. Nasruddin is the fool of the Sufi tradition, and one day he's walking past a cave, and he sees a yogi in there meditating, and being Nasruddin, he interrupts the guy, and he says, "Hey, what are you thinking about? What are you meditating on? What are you seeking?" The yogi says, "I am contemplating the animals, and I learn many lessons which can transform a man's life." Nasruddin says, "Well, teach me what you know, and I'll tell you what I know, because a fish has already saved my life." The yogi is surprised. Surely only a holy man, only a saint can have his life saved by a fish. And so he agrees to tell Nasruddin everything he knows. When he's finished, he says, "Nasruddin, I have taught you everything, and I would be proud to know what you know. How is it that a fish saved your life?" And Nasruddin said, "It's simple. I was dying of hunger on the day that I caught it, and thanks be to the fish, I have lived 3 more days." We are not the only ones in possession of wisdom and strength.